Right, let's continue unpacking the developments around the Senzo Meyiwa murder case now and look at the processes or channels which legal practitioners can use to report issues of harassment, amongst many other things. Advocate Malesela Tefo alleged that he's been subjected to constant harassment by the state and the presiding judge. He has made serious allegations, but how could these actually impact the case itself? Let's unpack yesterday's developments for you now. Bring in legal expert Ian Allis, who joins us via our video link this morning. It's great to have you on the program again, Ian. Thanks so much indeed for making time. The last time we spoke, you and I were stunned by the emergence of the second docket. I wonder how stunned you were yesterday when Teffo withdrew from the case.
Well, this trial has certainly got more drama in it than the Netflix series. That's what I can see.
Absolutely. The obvious question is about the impact this will have. I mean, is it, for instance, a far-gone conclusion that accused number 1 to 4 will now have some kind of counsel speedily in order to continue with this case, or do you foresee more delays insofar as that is concerned?
They're going to struggle with this because this trial has already been running several days. And now they've basically almost got to, a new counsel has got to come in there, refamiliarize themselves with the facts, possibly look at the avenues of whether or not the defense that's already been utilized and already been raised as a plausible defense to continue with. And there's going to, without a doubt, be postponement applications and issues with regards to whether or not there was competent legal counsel being raised, and a plethora of questions which are going to undoubtedly delay the trial, even if not in the long term, for a significant period of time during the course of this year. The fact that they're only going to be resuming in August on a trial that's already partly heard for as many days as it has been is going to, without a doubt, raise certain eyebrows.
And we know that it's unconstitutional for the case itself to continue without these 4 people having legal representatives there. So essentially we can't really even get to the merits of the case until somebody somewhere decides to pick up from where Malesela Tefo left off.
Well, that's an understatement. And the problem is that this case hasn't exactly been basked in glory. And in all due respect to Advocate Teffo, with everything that's taken place, it's going to be very difficult for somebody to come in afresh, take over, proceed with what has been raised, and especially there's the elements of questions that have been raised with the various theories and the allegations and submissions that have been raised to take this to take a case like this on comfortably, and knowing all of, if one could say, the theories that have already been thrown out into the courtroom, and the theatrics that have already taken place. One tends to forget that there's actually been 2 advocates on brief, where one has raised certain points and the other one has raised other issues. So to have a coordinated attack once again, and there's still the other external factors of AfriForum's involvement and the various watching briefs that are all involved, whoever is going to be taking this on such short notice is certainly going to be walking to a proverbial lion's den.
Sure. And, you know, you speak about some of those conspiracy theories. I wonder whether there's any point where a court says, hold on, let's take a step back, deal with all these issues that are clearly casting a shadow over this case, and then get back to the merits of who was behind the murder. Because there's just so many questions around it. To what extent does that affect even the credibility of proceedings, even if they were to continue in August, despite your skepticism around that possibly happening?
The problem that's actually been raised is that the judge has been brought into question, the state has been brought into question, the police have been brought into question, the investigation has been brought into question, now our president has been brought into question. The problem that comes with something like that, it's almost like it's been pre-set up for some sort of appeal in the event of a guilty finding, that there were just so many people involved in the supposed cover-up. And the thing is it's always permissible in a criminal matter to introduce an alternative version. But the problem is it's going to make it near impossible for somebody to come in here with everything that's in actual fact been raised and the history that's in actual fact been raised and the plausibility and implausibility of certain of these things. So that's also placed everything into question. The other issue that, and if one can address the elephant in the room, the problem came as well is that Advocate Teffo was representing four of the accused, and now he's stepping aside, but continuing on a watching brief for the deceased's family. That in its own right leads to some very questionable and ethical questions being raised with the Legal Practices Council, and certain of the allegations against the judge being raised by the Judicial Services Council.
Hold on, what do you mean by that? Where's the ethical conflict?
Is realistically, and one of the issues that have been raised has been at the point of stating that there's that he's going to continue on a watching brief on the matter, right. And it was stated that it would be on the Senzo Meyiwa family. Now, at the same time, the man was actually representing the people accused of the man's murder. Now, that in its own right can be highly suggestive as far as a potential conflict of interest goes.
Ventilate that for us a bit more. Suggestive in what sense? Are you saying that there could be a scenario where Malesela Tefo didn't necessarily believe that, he's actually said as much, that he didn't believe that those four men are behind the murder itself. How does that complicate his task, as it were, now that he's on a watching brief for Sfiso?
Remember one thing is, at the end of the day, your instructions stem from your client.
Yeah.
In this type of situation, where is the client? It's one thing believing that your client is innocent. It's another thing potentially, from an ethical quandary, being in the situation that he's in, where he still continues on this matter as a watching. It's one thing if he said, out of interest, he's still going to continue from his own perspective. But when one actually mentions that you're going to continue as a watching brief now, and there's been this issue that was raised beforehand by the judge, as standing with a foot in potentially both camps, where you're representing the interests of the people being accused, and that is your primary focus. Yet at the same time, you're also keeping an eye on proceedings on behalf of the deceased. The issue of that leads to the ethical question, and that might go ahead and create a conflict of interest in the circumstances between what your role is and who you are actually serving. And that in its own right might create scrutiny from the LPC, or being the Legal Practices Council. They may take a look and say, it's one thing you believe in your client, but at the same time you're representing your clients on behalf of the deceased, and you're introducing evidence that might in actual fact be contrary to what actually the investigations state. Now, it's always permissible to introduce an alternative version, or in this case, an alternative suspect. But at the same time one has to be careful about the road on that should it be shown that that was not the case, that it can be that it can always be misinterpreted, as well as to bringing misleading facts to a court's attention. And that's where it's a completely theoretical debate.
Gotcha.
But it is a debate, especially in light of the drama that's in actual fact embroiled this entire matter.
I hear you. Quick one, Ian. How unusual is it for counsels to change clients in one case, the way Malesela Tefo has?
It's not unusual. Let's put it in this way. It's because it's such a high-profile matter. It does happen often. Not to the extent of having it where it's such a significant period of time and certain of the reasons raised. That might be something different. But the problem is because it's such a high-profile matter that it's in actual fact highlighted the issue more than, say, for example, if this was a 3-day long domestic violence related matter, for instance, or a possession of drugs or drunken driving matter, if it were the case.
Right.
But it happens, but in this type of situation, especially so far down the line, and so many days into the trial, and so many witnesses down, it is unusual,
sure,
especially since it's not from a request of the accused, and some of the reasons that have been stated for it might be deemed as a little too expansive.
Got you.
If one
All right.
could say that.
We're going to have to leave it there. It does raise eyebrows at the very least. Ian Allis, thanks very much indeed for always weighing in. Ian is a legal expert helping us connect the dots in the latest twist and turn in the Senzo Meyiwa trial.